We're live streaming.
We are live streaming. Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting in June of Mahone Bay Town Council. We have some citizens with us here in council chambers tonight, and we've got a very interesting agenda, so it promises to be a good meeting. Good evening, everyone. Oh, there I am.
Very good meeting.
Huh? That's right. Are we done, Eric?
You're so good.
Okay, Deputy Mayor will not be joining us tonight. He sends his regrets. You have an agenda, but before we do that, we'll begin, as we always try to do, by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaties, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Call a meeting to order. You have an agenda that we will consider approving with
Zoom went away.
You're still showing up on Zoom for us. You're on Zoom from your other computer, I guess. Yeah, okay. So, okay, so you'd have to share it separately from the other computer if you were gonna do that, but.
Yeah,
if-
I don't have it.
You know, okay, well. Is everybody in the room comfortable with seeing it up there?
yeah, works for me.
Okay. Far away, so hello, good evening, everyone. For everyone is doing well. My name is Nick Pavlinek. My spouse Chelsea and I moved to the Hawthorne Road neighborhood in Mahone Bay about 2 years ago. Some of you may already know me from being on the Asset Management Committee and the Logo Committees. And they were a great opportunity for me as I got to learn more about the town and meet new residents, which gets more and more difficult as you get older to meet new people. Appreciate the opportunity today to introduce a requested amendment to the planning strategy and land use bylaw for Hawthorne Road and bring forward information in a respectful way about some important information about our neighborhood that maybe is not well known. As someone who highly values community safety and the environment, it was important for me to bring forward this information and the proposed amendment on behalf of friends and neighbors, some of which are here today, and the approximately 40 others that have signed our petition in support. my hope is together we can have a closer look at our neighborhood and come to a balanced and reasonable outcome for all stakeholders. So I'm just gonna, oops.
There we go.
Just like this. Oh, there we go. Sorry. I work in IT, believe it or not. I can't figure this out. So thanks, Eric. So as I mentioned, although I haven't lived in Mahone Bay a long time, it was pretty easy for me to see that despite the town being small and size and population, it's really complex from an infrastructure perspective. You go from street to street, even in the same zone, there's a lot of differences. And of course, it's not possible to upgrade all of the town infrastructure at once, even if we wanted to. It's just not possible. And I understand the town is trying to upgrade where it can parts of the town that are suited for densification, like on Main Street, which is ongoing. And the new planning documents were a major and difficult multi-year effort with a very large scope. And I know staff and council worked really hard to create them as best they could with the information they had available at the time to make complex and difficult decisions. And myself, I have 20 years of experience with major projects and process changes, so I'll be the first to say, of course, there's no perfect people, and it's not fair and reasonable to expect that every possible scenario in the town is going to be reflected in those documents. It's not reasonable. And considering the living document mindset is very important, especially when considering the safety of residents and the environment. So with that said, the proposed amendment that I'd like to introduce today for Hawthorne Road was intended to support continued compatible development in the area, raise awareness of existing infrastructure safety issues, and hopefully start engagement opportunities with residents in other neighborhoods related to safety, as mentioned in the Fire Smart Council presentation back in February. So just for background purposes, in case some folks don't know Hawthorne Road too well, so I came to know that it was pioneering green development when it got started back in the early 2000s, I believe in the province or perhaps the country, which I think is special for Mahone Bay to have that legacy. Many people drive through our area to see wildlife such as deer and owls, and honestly, rarely a day goes by that I don't see a deer when we're out walking our dog. The area does have, however, infrastructure and environmental features that do make it fragile and complex and likely cost prohibitive to modify retroactively to safely support densification, such as its narrow road widths, reliance on residents entirely on well water, lack of a second exit, wildfire risks, amongst others. As well, virtually all the development in the area has occurred under the past bylaw and reflected, to my understanding, the original area vision, environment, infrastructure limitations, and land covenants. So continuing, so this little table, sorry, it must be hard to see on the screen there, but it was just meant to illustrate the complexity in the town. I guess now some of you probably know this really well, but I just wanted to show a little comparison of some example neighborhoods in the same residential zone, with Hawthorne there being in the top row. So starting with town water. So of course we don't have town water. We all rely in the area on our groundwater. And the yields we found can vary significantly in the neighborhood. So we don't all have like the same volume of water even right now. And from climate change, perhaps over time, it will be more and more sort of unpredictable. There are no fire hydrants or alternative fire suppression sources in the neighborhood. A fire pond was, as I understand, originally planned for the area, but never happened. Third, the road width. As I understand, way back when the development got started, in an effort, I think, to help get it going, there were some concessions made to the road width. And because of that, now the road is quite narrow compared to town standards. Fourth, we did have a wildfire last year right at the entrance of our road, and thankfully, because of the quick work of the volunteer fire department, was extinguished. But during that time, we could not leave the neighborhood as we only have one way in and one way out. So we were confined there because we don't have a second exit, unfortunately. And as I understand from my reading, originally in the subdivision, there was a plan for a second exit, like there is land, to my understanding, that Mahone Bay does own in the back of the subdivision. That was planned to be a second exit, but never materialized. Okay, so sorry. I'm terrible at ad lib, so I have to prepare everything. So talking about the amendment itself, so the intention was to try to make it as, straightforward as possible. So the previous bylaw, like I mentioned, pretty much all the development in the area had occurred under the past bylaw, which was in place since 2008. And it's essentially what we're recommending here. And the benefits, as I mentioned again, is to help support that continued compatible development in the area based on the constraints that I mentioned. Low risk and effort, relatively speaking, because again, it was in place for 14, 16 years. It aids also in future amendments because, again, me being like heavily involved in the processes, I just see this as an opportunity that, because people come and go, and a lot of the things are researched were from like 20 years ago. So if we have a way to get in our documents that the neighborhood has these features, hopefully, 10, 20 years from now, we won't go through the same thing. So that I think would also be a win. And it helps protect residents in the municipality while we evaluate the other infrastructure concerns that I had already mentioned related to the second exit and fire suppression. So the next couple of slides are just meant to show where some of the research came that I had performed to perform this presentation. I really did try my best to do my due diligence and look at accredited sources before bringing this forward in respect to everyone's time. So this first one is from the Fire Smart presentation back in February, highlighting that the Hawthorne Road area being probably the highest risk in the town for wildfire. The second is from the Canadian National Guide for Wildland Urban Interface Fire Guidance, which indicates that with new or significantly denser development, it recommends assessing the water capacity in advance of such developments, including for fire suppression. Related to that same publication, recommendation about not having emergency access left to the end of a subdivision development. The next reference is from the province of Nova Scotia Guide to Groundwater Assessments for Subdivision Development. So this came out in around 2011, I think, after the subdivision got going. So it's just to say that in subdivisions larger than 25 lots, it recommends doing a level 2 groundwater assessment. And the following slides just speak to that, why, and things that would come out of that report, like lot sizing, ensuring that neighboring properties are not impacted because of densification. This is an example of another neighboring community, Oakland and Indian Point, that have a secondary land use plan for that area that was established, I think, in the early 90s. And just a reference from the province's land use planning guidance that does mention secondary land use planning there is something that can be used for unique circumstances, which, as we discussed here today, I think I gave some examples. And the help we're requesting is consideration of this amendment and forthcoming report from the development office to really help with peace of mind for the folks in the neighborhood. And in parallel, if we can understand the process to start looking at some of these existing concerns related to fire suppression and emergency access. I don't expect those things to happen like this, but understanding that they take a long time, I think we just want to know how do we at least try to get them on the radar.
Okay.
That was what I had. Any questions, comments?
Councilor Feeney?
Thank you for that, Nick. I don't actually know much about the secondary land use plan process, but strikes me as that there's a precedent locally.
Yeah,
Kind of reading the tea leaves. So you're not surprisingly, you live in a really beautiful neighborhood.
very
And it's popular.
Mhm.
And there are other lots that are currently on the market for development.
Mhm.
So is there any concern by the neighborhood that I guess would be addressed by these changes that the future growth, let's say it's another 10 more homes there. Based on this bylaw, they would be kind of constrained to single family
Mhm.
dwellings versus higher dense, potentially higher dense options. Of which some people may think there's a better economic outcome for that individual developer. Do you have any sense of like at what point does, if the rest of the pies, if the rest of the pie gets filled in, do you think that that would exacerbate this water table issue? Or do you think it's not so much the single family dwelling of 4 or 5 individuals in a home, but it's really something more high dense that would really drive you over the edge of really negative impacting everything?
that's a good point. You know, I'm admittingly non-expert and I'm not an engineer or a geologist or anything like that.
Mhm.
From what I could say from the folks in our neighborhood, virtually all of them supported this motion. I think in general, again, I can't speak for everyone, that we all support growth in the neighborhood and we want that to continue. The main concern is that with the land covenants that we have, which in general, to my knowledge, at least the one for our property, limits the type of development that can happen. And also based on my layman's understanding of some of the provincial recommendations related to doing groundwater assessments in larger density neighborhoods, that for safely any significantly denser development to happen, I think it would be prudent to have those professional studies done because it's one of those things, you know, you don't know because we can't visually see. It's not like Oakland Lake where it's readily accessible. Unfortunately, to do that due diligence, it's very difficult. And I can only just refer back to what was in place before from a bylaw perspective. Again, trying to be pragmatic here for everyone's sake. But my feeling, at least from the folks in the neighborhood that I spoke to, that they are supportive of going back to the original bylaw that limited the type of densification of the neighborhood because of all those constraints, like the narrow road width, one exit, higher wildfire risk, those sorts of things. Just my humble. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. I thought it's very thorough and well looked out for the future and also what your situation is. Did you do it alone or was it a feedback from other people in the group as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I did have a lot of, you know, positive support again, joined by great neighbors and friends that came here tonight. A lot of this I did do on my own, so it was quite an investment of personal time, but to be honest, I am very proud of it because for me, it was very important in talking to everyone in the neighborhood. Like we really love Mahone Bay and we really love the neighborhood and we want to also be partner with the town. We don't want to be the person on Facebook, you know, just saying things, you know, that are unfounded. We want to at least bring forward like these points of attention because we know that the town is complex and it's impossible to know everything about everything. And as I spoke with the mayor a couple of weeks ago, before there used to be 2 council meetings a month, and now there's 2 council meetings or more a week. So, you know, trying to be fair and reasonable that, you know, can't expect everyone to know everything about everything, but at the same time, you know, we wanted to bring forward in a respectful way these things that are important to us.
So what would be, can you number your priorities of like, this may take time, should it go forward? And what would be your first priority? Would it be having that second exit? Would it be the water source? Would it be the road width? Yeah, but sometimes you can't do all of it at one
It's been
time.
20 years.
Right, so I'm just, if there was a priority,
Oh, if I may, again, it's my 2 cents as a layman here, but I think first step would be the bylaw to be back as it was, because in my humble view, it's easier to update a document than it is to, if an apartment goes there, it's hard to undo that. So for me personally, I think in terms of practically, like you said, tomorrow, even if we wanted to, we can't build the road, that second road. So my personal opinion would be to try to put the bylaw back in place, at least temporarily. And then as a second step, because again, I'm not an expert on any of these things, I think it would be helpful to have a qualified person. I'm not sure if it would be from like the fire department or what organization, but to assess the area and say, based on the current population and potential growth and the characteristics, what are the recommendations? And, option 1, 2, 3, and then together we can assess, again, based on cost and other factors, what makes sense. That would be my humble recommendation, to at least have that feedback, because I don't believe a study like that was done before. And for me, I would think that would be the first step in my opinion, if that sounds reasonable to us.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Do you have a comment, CL?
Well, I guess I should comment on a couple of things procedurally. So the point you made about the second exit, I just want to clarify. So at the time of this development, the municipal specification was that you would reach 50 units before a second exit would be considered. So to your point, the original development was anticipated to max out at less than 50 units.
Mm-hmm.
At this point today, there still are less than 50 units.
Yeah.
But if you were to say every undeveloped lot was developed to the maximum extent in the current bylaw, it could exceed 50 units, at which point, obviously, the town would need to grapple with that question. So as you say, restricting it below 50, restricting therefore the potential need. But I think we're also all considering whether that standard that was in place at the time in terms of a secondary exit was adequate in light of the experiences over the past year. So I just say, just to clarify why there was a reserved section that was not actually used for that purpose, it's based on that understanding of the number of units on the street.
Okay, so then, let's start going.
I have another clarification too, but go ahead, Joel.
Oh, so I had a question on that, but where is the actual, that land reserve? Where is it located?
So it's basically below the lower loop and the trail. So it would adjoin the trail to the road. So you could create a gated secondary access with permission from DNR to use the trail. It would be gated. It would only be used in an emergency. And I think generally, for most people in the neighborhood would probably prefer that any secondary entrance not be generally available for public use. That only be used
Regular
in
traffic use.
So yeah, that's an option. I just also want to clarify the point about going back to the previous bylaw, just to make it clear, especially for anybody watching, that the previous bylaw defined the zone's acceptable uses differently. But the zone was always this larger zone that wasn't exclusive to Hawthorne. So in the recent planning process, the town didn't apply a new zone to the hill. The town changed the appropriate uses for that zone throughout the entire community. So at this point, what would need to be done to satisfy this request, and I'm sure will be discussed by planning advisory in due course, would be to establish a new zone. Because none of the characteristics of the zones that are in our current planning strategy are what's being suggested here. So it would essentially require the creation of a new zone, the acceptable uses of which could align with the acceptable uses for this zone in the previous bylaw, but it wouldn't be returning to that bylaw because the rest of the communities, that zone still exists and has changed.
Yeah, we're only starting, we're just talking about Hawthorne Road, not talking about rolling back residential down for.
Okay. Councillor Carter, did you?
Yes, well, I'd like to know, or I'd like to have some guidance from staff about what procedurally, what will happen now.
I can address that.
Okay.
So the way these normally go, Nick elected to come in and introduce this, which was great. It will come forward from the planning department the same way that the recent request to amend the land use bylaw came forward. So they first report it to council and say, we received this. will you direct us to hold a PIM and provide a report on that to PAC? So I don't know where that is in the works, but if it has been submitted to them, it will probably be on the next council agenda, and then it would go to the next PAC. I will say that the timing is such that it will definitely not move forward until like later in the fall or, you know, post the election.
Post-election,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just because of the schedule of PAC meetings.
Counselor Now, did you have a comment?
Nick, when we talked and we were talking a lot about fire suppression, and I think that is one of the hardest items in this whole procedure to fix.
Yeah.
Without a, you know, because when the original development was applied for, they had said that they would put in a water, well, for fire suppression, well, never happened.
Yeah.
And they refused, Ken wanted to put water up there, but they refused to put in a pump down below that would boost the pressure to go up there. So I'm not sure how we actually fix that.
I agree with you, Richard, like, there's no sort of, you know, solution we could snap our fingers and fix, but that's why my first thought was to at least maybe have someone have a look at the situation, give some options. Again, some of them may just not be feasible, but at least to have some of those possibilities on the table.
We gotta have some kind of plan in place over fire suppression. We really do.
What's the second degree?
Do we not have a standard now that the fire department has to meet in terms of deploying a gear from the bottom of the hill to the top, that in the event of a fire?
Be okay if we had the water supply at the bottom of the hill. That
Well,
fire hydrant down there is, you know,
there's no, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay,
But we do have other sources. We have Orange Brook, if there's any water into it. that we
Yeah.
can Supply from.
and if there isn't any water,
The fire department is planning an exercise to see how much we can get up there.
okay. I remember at the time that there was a determination that there was a certain specification that the fire department had to demonstrate from down at the old fire hall to the top of Hawthorne Hill.
Let's see that, but they were supposed to put down a fire farm. and That didn't happen.
Oh, yeah,
That would have been
yeah.
our source of water up there, right?
Yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
That was great.
No problem. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Everyone.
good presentation.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you to, if you're all here to hear the presentation, thank you for coming in. Appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
I'm more than welcome to stay on because it gets even better.
We're always the correspondence now.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's go to communications correspondence. CAO, do you want to talk about the note from MJSB? The new agreements that have been sent to council for consideration?
Well, I think the report is quite thorough there.
Okay,
I can certainly speak to any of the things included in it, but essentially this is a rundown of the various
yeah,
amendments to the agreement, reflective of addition of certain services that have been previously agreed to by the board. So essentially, after all the back and forth about what services to add when and how it to be paid for, and
this defines them,
this is wrapping it all back up into the core agreement.
but we haven't actually signed off on them, have we?
Each of the things has a different status. The only ones included in here are the ones that have been approved to proceed. So we ended up having safety and then
Yeah.
not having procurement
Yeah,
as a result of discussions earlier this
Yeah.
year. And then
Okay.
the agreement is designed in such a way that it can add additional schedules. So basically, when procurement comes along, it will presumably be Schedule 5 procurement, but we have to work out the details of that service before. it would be
Okay.
added. So that'd be next year's.
but we do have to sign off on the ones that are in place.
Yeah, well, we have to sign off now on the amendment of the agreement to conform with the
Yes,
decision
okay.
previously about which services would be included.
Would
So
you,
we have agreed in principle, but this is the sort of finalization.
okay,
I think these are in good shape now.
we normally have a motion directing me to sign these things.
Yeah, there is a recommendation. It's just phrased a little bit oddly. It's the very first thing in their reports. It's the last thing in ours. I like to make sure you read down and get there, but they put it right at the front. So
Mayor, I'm happy to make that, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Mayor, I move that council approve, the municipal joint service board agreement. The Schedule 1, which is the waste management shared service. Schedule 2, which is the information technology shared service. Schedule 3, which is the human resources shared service. And Schedule 4, which is the occupational and health and safety shared service.
That's the new one.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. And with if the motion is successful, then we'll sign off on it. Okay,
Just point, but this is a 5-year rate. These are 5-year terms or 3-year terms? I think you're paying the 5, right?
I believe they are.
Well, that's good.
Okay,
But it is 5. So
You heard the
that's-
That's been 5.
Okay.
you've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Yes, please.
Just to clarify, the next presentation, will that go to planning without a motion on our part?
No, so what'll happen is the planners, upon receipt of the formal application, will provide a request for decision to direct it to BAC. So at the next meeting of council, you'll get that and you'll have to make a motion to direct it to BAC.
Can't do the
Where we gonna
motion.
get it from? There's an application.
It'll be a staff.
Oh. Was an application put in, is there already?
Nick nodded to saying that that was the case. I wasn't sure if he'd formally submitted it yet or not.
Okay.
So yeah, that means it will be on our next meeting.
Okay,
Do we vote on this one?
Yes, we did.
okay.
So otherwise.
Recording in progress.
And we're good again. I apologize for that interruption.
Oh. I think it might be on.
I just muted you.
Okay,
All right.
so there are a couple of other requests in the correspondence, if anybody wants to jump in.
Yes, let's keep going with that.
Penny, have next, you have a question?
I've lost my,
Oh,
5.2.
so the 5.2, the Scott Tanner letter.
Free
can
Church
we-
Foundation.
Do we need a motion to receive this receive? No. Just leave it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the next item would be the 5.3.
request for reimbursement,
request for
5.3. CAO, would you comment, please?
So yes, this one would normally just be handled by staff. We have a policy in this regard. The reason it wasn't is because in this case, the policy wasn't explicitly followed. So typically, the public works manager has to be advised of the damage and take a look at it and okay the repair so that when the invoice comes in, he pays it. In this case, even though we've done this many, many years, because this building is often damaged, and we don't dispute that the damage likely occurred, they just sent us the letter with the bill, with the invoice, without us having had a chance to pre-approve. So Jonathan feels that he can't approve it, and if council's gonna approve it, you should approve it with the caveat that next time around, you have to follow the policy or we
Yeah.
will not approve it. So I don't wanna suggest that you not approve it, because
Yeah.
I am pretty confident this did occur. But at the same time, we need to make sure people follow the procedure so that Jonathan can approve it, knowing what's happened.
Just wondering why we don't just pay in advance.
They're on the 1st of October for damage to come.
Could we not just defer it until Jonathan's had a chance?
It's too late, the work's done.
So it's done.
Oh, the work's
Yeah,
done. Oh,
that's the
God.
problem, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So he said he just would feel more comfortable that it would go to council in this case,
Yes.
but then we should tell them to go back to the normal way of doing it in the future.
Can I move that we authorize the payment, the appropriate payment to Donna Mossman for damage done last building?
Okay, seconded by Councillor Carver.
Just Georgina. Wilson.
Oh, sorry.
Wish Donna would be pleased.
So with the reminder that this needs to go to Jonathan first next year.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes, okay. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. Let's go to 5.4, Donna Mossman. A note on Comfort Station upgrades.
So if I could quickly comment, this request aligns with our anticipated schedule.
Mhm.
We were not expecting to begin work until after the end of October. And I guess I'd say we could just jump on this and say, we do need to close before a normal recent December, first weekend of December closure. So I would say this is actually a great bookend. Let's officially say that the washers will be closed after the end of October this year, so that we can do the renovations.
As of the end of October.
Yeah.
Halloween's the last day. Okay, that seems really quite reasonable, I think.
So I think this request just lined up with what Jonathan would have recommended anyway.
Mhm.
And the usership does drop off quite a bit for those last couple of months. I know it's appreciated at Christmas, but.
Okay.
The Father Christmas Festival is when?
Normally, now it's the whole month, isn't it, of December?
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts
Anyway,
late November.
You can't wait forever. to
Yeah, we
get
can get some time while the weather's okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's make that decision and then we'll wait for the, the chamber to write their letter of complaint about it, but everyone's right in this, can't please everybody, but, and it's well intentioned.
Let's not send them our thank you for their letter of complaint.
Are you looking for a motion to?
Well, I
close at
mean,
the end
one way to
of
do that,
October?
we don't need a motion to close them, but one way to do the motion would be for
Well,
council to make a motion
I think-
saying, let's respond to this letter,
Yes.
indicating that
Okay.
It is our intention to close them as of October 31st, and then it's. out.
Right, and I also think it would be wise of us to formally, let the chamber know that that's the plan.
We'll put that in this motion if somebody wants to make it, then we write back to this person and also advise the chamber that.
And the festivals committee.
Fair enough. So a letter, acknowledgement back to, Ms. Mossman that, we're going to follow that advice, close the comfort station as of the 1st of November. And also,
The CC is.
CC the Chamber of Commerce and the festivals
Committee.
committee.
Okay,
And anything else? Any edits to that motion?
I'm good.
No, Benny, okay.
all right, you seconded, Councillor Carter?
Well, I think Councillor now actually beat me to it.
Really? Okay. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? That motion's carried. Thank you. 5.5, a note from Dan Boudreau. Boudreau, but it must be the original. President of the Bridgewater Legion, request for Remembrance Day flyby.
So I would like to move that the mayor send a letter of support for the low-level flyby on Remembrance Day 2024.
Yeah,
Sending the information as requested.
we haven't seen them of late, but we sent the letter every year. But
Yeah.
you
I'll
get a little
second
cloud
that.
cover and it doesn't happen. Thank you,
I'll
Councillor
second that.
Longstrop.
And I just wanted to affirm that last year we were looking for that,
Yeah,
that we approved.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
months earlier.
Conditions all have to be, and then they have to have the flight crew ready and they hit a lot of towns on the same flyby. Don't want to use that word, hit a lot of towns. Okay, you've heard the motion, duly seconded on the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Finally, 5.6, the letter from Karen Pinsent, representative of the Mahone Bay Signature Festivals Society about the grant application.
Mayor, move that we approve the grant to request it in the amount of $400 to come out of the unallocated grant fund that I understand has a $3,000 balance.
And they would not have known that this money would have been required
No.
when the grant deadline was still in place. The requirement only didn't become realized until recently. Seconded?
I do have a question.
Okay.
At our last meeting, we had a request from essentially the same group for $400. Is it a different $400?
No, same grant, same request.
Same $400.
It's just under the umbrella of a registered charity. To meet the
Oh, I
policy,
see.
to
Okay.
meet the policy requirements.
So it's the same money.
Mhm.
Okay,
So we already approved it.
so on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Just before we leave that, I would remind you that I sent out an email extending to you all the invitation to participate in the Communities in Bloom session with the judges on the 9th of July. If you can confirm your attendance, we'll know how much water to put in the soup on the 9th. Okay, staff reports. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a short report to council, and as usual, I'll take questions. I just wanted to note, in the, I guess, the spirit of tidying this up as we get towards the end of the council term, based on the budget, I'm recommending the removal of number 2 there, so just sort of to be removed, because we didn't budget for the housing strategy to go ahead this year. I think that, you know, what housing strategy, should it ever happen, will consist of, will be something for a future council to discuss. And so tracking this motion indefinitely with no expectation of it being realized seems not especially relevant. So we've been through this with a couple other items where council suggested that I suggest taking something off, so I'm suggesting taking that off. Other than that, I'm happy to take any question.
Councillor Carter.
Does that require a motion to take it off?
No, I mean, I've removed other things from this list, but I don't remove them without saying that, just in case anyone thinks they should stay on. So if anyone feels that it should stay on, then I guess this is an opportunity to comment, but I'll just take it off otherwise.
What's happening with the housing strategy, CAO?
Well, while it remains something the council has in its strategic plan, it's not in the budget for this year, and the strategic plan only corresponds with this year. So the new council will review the previous council's strategic plan and report on what was done and what wasn't done, and then they can decide if that is in next year's budget or in future year's budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, because we didn't get the CMHC money we'd applied to, and there just wasn't the opportunity to advance that. That's where we ended up.
We didn't get the CMHC money that was gonna be co-signed with the.
Oh, no, sorry, just, we didn't get the housing accelerator.
Oh, different one,
money.
okay,
Yeah.
thank, oh, that
No,
one.
we
The big one.
pivoted to the one you're
Yeah,
talking
okay.
about, and that's still in the works.
Eric's month of heavy lifting.
Yeah. Yes. So if there's questions on anything else in there.
This stuff isn't really in the report, but I thought it might be a good time to ask it. Can you tell us who's paying for the mowing of the town portion of the property up at the center? Like the part between Gordon Rodenizers and the
Soccer facilities.
soccer field and the laneway? Because that Nature Reflections been mowing that and taking care of it. I'm just wondering who's paying the bill for it.
If they're picking it up, then I guess MBU is paying the bill for it.
Okay, so the town's not.
No, I mean, the town would be doing it ourselves.
Well, that's why I asked it, because we have the equipment to do it.
I'll tell Jonathan, but maybe they're just doing it because they're there, you know, which
Well,
is
they're
fine.
just coming in and doing that as far as I can see, so.
Oh, okay. They had a contract with, Mahoma United, so that's,
Yeah.
but I'll check in, I'll check in.
Yeah, just I thought, you know, if we have the equipment and we're paying somebody else to do it, then why?
Yeah, if that is the case, then I will get back to you guys with
Okay,
why,
Yeah, okay, thanks. They were doing it tonight, that's why I brought firstly to my mind.
And if they are doing it, will it be stopped or?
If they're doing it for free, I don't think we necessarily need to stop.
Good.
But yeah.
Told them to swing up to my lawn, so you're doing it for free. Okay. Anything else on the staff report?
What's the status of the tours of the solar facility?
So we have to make a few further modifications to the parking area. There's a little bit of stuff that's been left there by Goldbeck. And we're putting up signage and getting a safety briefing together. So the tours will be ready by the fall. And schools have been advised to include it in their fall plans if they want to. And we are currently still advertising a newsletter to let us know so that when they are available, people can get in that, but. Yeah, there's just those little details for safety, you've got visitor parking, staff only, all this kind of, so we're putting those up shortly.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Entertain a motion to receive the report for information purposes. Moved by Councillor Feeney, seconded by Councillor Now. On that motion, you've heard of the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the BSP application.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there were two applications on tonight's agenda, BSP and PCAP. So the BSP is the Beautification Streetscaping Program. Both of these were envisioned to some extent in the budget process. Just to kind of summarize this beautification and streetscaping, the town would be in a position to apply for funding to support the exterior of the comfort station. But because that only amounts to $15,000 and the ask can be up to 20, We basically said we could leverage our grants to the Heritage Boat and Three Churches to carry out the activities for which those grants were being granted. And that we could do that as part of this VSP to leverage 50% provincial funding. So we're recommending we go ahead with this one that has the 3 different components as detailed in this report, in support of those organizations. The only town money going into those is the money that we've granted to those organizations. And we would otherwise benefit from getting the 50 cent dollars on the outside of the conversation. I will say the conversations have received funding from 2 sources that I can't specifically disclose, but that we have talked about previously, amounting to about $90,000 of external funding. So this would add 15, get us to 105. That's still only about a third of the cost.
Okay,
And this would be turned around by August, so before the October 31st, so we would be able to apply this if we get it.
okay. Councillor Carter,
And that $17,000 is already, that's in the budget?
Well, it's coming off the comfort station upgrades project, so
Okay,
we budgeted the full 30,
okay,
and then anything we get will reduce that amount.
okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Mayor, I move that council direct staff to apply to the 2024 beautification and streetscaping program for funding to support Edgewater revitalization project.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Carver on the motion. Question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Right, there was Eric's got at least one busy day now, because that's due on Thursday.
Yeah. This Thursday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Timely.
So,
The PCAP application.
So similarly, we expected in the budget to apply to PCAP to support the Fairmont Pine Grove Stormwater Project. And there's a little bit of background as to the scope of the project there. We'd be looking to go for $100,000. It's a competitive program, so I think that's the most that it is reasonable to request. I say that having spoken with the program administrator, so with PMAH. It's still a competitive program, so no guarantee we'll get everything or the amount requested, but it has been 6 years now since we got funding for this program, basically because the last time we asked for it, it was for a 5-year pilot, and we get tied up reporting on that. That has been completed. So now I think we stand a fairly good chance of accessing this funding. So the recommendation I think is pretty clear. The only addition to that is a second recommendation that points out that NJSB is also looking to apply for the PCAP program. And so in the interest of making it clear that these 2 things will be weighed by the department, staff do endorse supporting their application because they are us and we're allowed up to 2. And I don't see the harm that the province will decide on the merits of the applications. If they're going to fund their application and not ours, I don't think us providing a letter of support for theirs is going to change that. So I would recommend these motions. Happy to take any questions.
Do we attach the letter of support from us to their application, or do you do it all in one?
Yeah, we would send a letter to Gabe to put with the application that he's sending in.
I make a motion that council direct staff to apply the 2024 provincial capital assistance program for funding to support the Fairmont Pine Grove Stormwater Project, and the council direct staff to provide the requested letter of support for the NJSB board's application to the 2024 provincial capital assistance program.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Lomas Croft. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Now, road cost sharing program, the staff report item 6.4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this came as a little bit of a surprise. I guess this was projected in the CERNGAR service exchange process last year, but with the way that that process concluded, I wasn't actually clear whether they were going to be following through with this component. It looks like they are. So it's still pretty unclear from the communication exactly how they mean to approach this. I guess they're waiting to see what kind of response they receive. But in terms of the streets that were eligible for cost sharing, it's Main Street and Edgewater. It's basically, Edgewater is 1/3, Main Street's 2/3. And of that 2/3 Edgewater and half of Main, are already on our list for projects next year that would include at the end of the various components of resurfacing.
Mhm.
So, you know, they both already received provincial cost sharing, but they're gonna cost more than what we thought when we applied for that.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, you know, I think it's still worth seeing whether they're willing.
Mhm.
The one distinction I guess I would make is that, you know, if they want to, we could be looking at a contiguous repave, because to be honest, we know, or at least in our 10-year capital plan, that we're at least 4 or 5 years away from being able to do the section from Cherry Lane down through the Cenotaph and through Main Street. So if you're gonna pave Edgewater and you were gonna pave Main Street starting at Cherry Lane, paving between Parish and Cherry Lane, doing it all would seem reasonable. So one way the province might wanna look at that is what would it cost to pave from the entrance of town on Edgewater to the exit of town on Main towards Blockhouse, and see how that might be contributed to the projects we already have.
Mhm.
So it would increase the scope to include the distance from Parish to Cherry Lane, which, you know, we would have to tear up sometime in the future when we get some money for future road, but it would probably be nice to just do it. So anyway, that's what I'll tell them, if council's supportive, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Is there a plan to paint Main and Edgewater with gold paint or just to leave it as?
If they'll pay for it,
Speaking of which, there was a comment in social media about the conditions of crosswalks. Noting that the First Nations crosswalk and the Gay Pride crosswalk was quite bright and well painted. They aren't painted by our regular contract, are
they are painted by the contractor,
Yeah.
the zebra
But as far as
crossings
the-
elsewhere in town are painted by our own staff.
they? Okay,
So that's the difference.
that's why,
So, yeah, so the contractor isn't doing the regular stenciled out zebra crossings, so if some of those are faded, that's only until Public Works gets to them,
okay,
yeah. But the contractors come in and done what they are hired to do, which is the center lines, parking lot lines. And then those value added crosswalks that are a little bit more complex that the Public Works Department can't do. So, but anyone should bring up, if they have a concern about a specific crosswalk, bring it to the front office, Jonathan will make sure it gets repainted if it needs repainted.
the one over in front of Rebecca's was the one in particular, we got the lights and everything else.
Yeah.
for it, But the crosswalk itself is quite.
It will definitely be redone, but like I say, it will just be our guys. I expect in that case, it's traffic control, they're gonna wanna do all the ones that involve traffic control at once to maximize bringing the traffic control crew in. And if you look at Edgewater, like, you're not gonna be doing any painting running out in the middle of traffic on Edgewater, there's gonna be a need for traffic control, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would think that if that resident's watching, as soon as we line up the traffic control and public works staff in a nice sunny day, you'll see that work done, I'm sure it's impending.
Traffic control, public works staff and a sunny day,
But we're getting a lot of sun lately, so it shouldn't be too hard.
okay,
So there is a
Anything else?
motion in the report.
any other comments before we go on?
Sorry,
You
Dan.
gonna make-
Oh,
No, you've got the honor.
Next one,
I'm gonna make the motion.
oh, okay,
That council directs staff to submit planned Main Street and Edgewater Street paving projects to the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works for cost sharing consideration under the new provincial cost sharing program.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Counselor now, moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. So that was 6-4. Pool update,
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So
it's going swimming.
this update is specific to the, well, it's essentially the 2 pool projects that are included in the town's budget. The immediate retrofit of the pool, which I'm pleased to say is proceeding according to plan and will be completed in time for the normal opening of the pool, which should be on the 28th, the end of this month. So that was a tight squeeze to get that work going, but they do confirm that they're on track. They've completed the concrete and the plumbing, and they're just working on the liner now. And then in association with that, we wanted to report on the status of fundraising activities with the new pool. So obviously, the information on the design of the new pool is not disclosed in this report, but it will be publicly disclosed soon. And thereafter, it would be staff's intention to launch the fundraising activities for the new pool, which we expect will take more than a year. And the progress on that is obviously based on the progress of fundraising, with the opening of this pool season. So the report is just provided for information, but obviously there's an anticipation that there will be additional report coming with the attached design brief, which count to staff's expectation will be at your next meeting of council. So take any questions.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I have heard many of our taxpayers in town say, sometimes quite loudly, that there was no way in God's creation that this town needs a $4.5 million swimming pool. And we can't afford it. 3 months ago, I suggested we stop the presses to avoid whatever this expenditure is for these folks. So it's $100,000, I think, for the study. But I really think, given that in the early going, we're talking about $4.5 million, and we know that that's likely to be a bigger number. Do a little bit of soul searching about whether this is money well spent. I mean, to put it in perspective, we could take every kid that wants to swim in the home bay and take them to the LCLC in a limousine on call every summer for the next 50 years and still have money in the bank.
For the $4.5 million.
Yeah, well, for just the carrying cost of $4.5 million.
Yeah.
So I know it's a hugely emotional thing, and it's been there since the 60s.
And social.
I understand all that, but it's still a huge number.
Can I just remind on where the direction was to, so just so that everybody will recall, the reason we proceeded with the design to the point we have is that council's direction was that we would put this out there as a ready to go design that had received a lot of input to get to that point. And then it would essentially be up to the town, the next council, the community in general, to see if that gets carried forward. So, you know, this is in the budget, but it's in the budget for next year. There's no further expenditures after this point. So now I guess the question becomes, do we put out the fundraising target and see what happens? And, you know, that's been our expectation, is that we were gonna try to do that.
So is the build target to start 25, 26, or once we have achieved the right amount of funding?
Well, the way that it was expressed by this council, it would be when we have received the right level of commitment of funding. But I guess the next council would, if it remains at the status it currently has, would have to decide, is it going to continue as an effort to attract funding? Is it gonna go off the books completely? Or is it gonna proceed regardless of funding, which admittedly is unlikely.
So, I mean, this is a worthwhile conversation. I'm looking forward to at least seeing preliminary design, just to understand, like, what does $4.5 million get you? Like, what are we comparing apples and apples? Like, what's the full magnitude of the scope that's being proposed? So I understand that that's going to come to the next council meeting or sometime in July. It'll be before the August break.
It'll come to the next.
Okay, so, I mean, I think we're all looking forward to seeing it and having a chance to see what, what they have planned, what the design looks like, and then we can weigh in at that point.
Councillor Carter.
And I'd just like to confirm that we have already replaced $1 million. From the
So,
funds.
it has been announced, so it is in place, and it's, something that we can reference. That being said, I think the intention of our, MLA was that we would launch the fundraising activities, and then she would sort of specifically speak to that as a first contribution. In fact, if we launch this with the meter, I believe it would be her intention to, as part of that, move it up and indicate that the province has made that commitment. I don't mind mentioning it because it has been formally announced, but I will say we haven't spoken about it widely in the community. Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting conversation next month,
Yes.
or in 2 weeks.
Councillor Owens Croft.
And I have to remind us all that this school will be accessible to everyone. these are new laws in Nova Scotia that when you build any
Oh, yeah.
infrastructure
Yeah.
municipally, you have to provide accessibility, and it is a human right. It's a human right. And not everybody in town understands human rights and equality and also accessibility, what accessibility means to people. If you're healthy and you don't have mobility issues and whatnot, you don't always understand what it means when you can't use a public space. And it's our job as counselors to educate the public. So when you hear remarks that are negative about the pool and the cost of the pool, besides the
It's more than
increase
just
in the
kids.
cost of living,
Mm.
it's more than children using the pool. And, you know, we don't want to turn to a state like Florida, who is a retirement community and only the taxpayers do things in favor of the retirement community. We want to be a whole community with all generations living in the whole bay. But we also have to realize this is a human rights issue as well. When we build anything, whether it's a gymnasium or, you know, any kind of outdoor park, we have to make things accessible for everyone.
I often think of the book that former counselor Lynn Henniger gave us all copies of, about how to kill your community. And one of the chapters was forgetting about the children, to develop their opportunities and their activities in the town. So,
Well, if we launch the fundraising, hopefully
Yep.
some former children will have some
Yeah.
contributions they can come up with.
yeah. Okay,
So this.
So,
motion is-
Mayor,
There's a motion
I'd
there.
move that we accept the report for information.
thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor, motion's carried. Okay, that is the end of the staff reports. Let's go to the honorable senator from up the little road there.
Edgewater Lane.
It's late. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. After much toing and froing and discussion about how to approach this issue of solar garden ownership, and maybe for the people watching can explain that it was always assumed that the solar facility was being built by the town and the town funded. And that we would sell power to the utility. But we have,
Directly to the utility,
Yes.
not, yeah.
but we are under the impression, I guess that's the best way to put it, that the UARB doesn't distinguish between the entity of the town and the entity of the MEU. Is that correct, Bill?
Doesn't see us as separate.
So the fact that the town is building the facility means that in effect, the electrical utility is building the facility. And that creates a whole new set of problems. So, having said that, we thought it would be best to get a summary of the pluses and minuses of both potential ways of ownership, either owned by the town or owned by the utility, to bring back to a special meeting of this group so that we can decide once and for all, put the wheels in motion to get all the various legal and financial and regulatory issues sorted out. So with that in mind, this is the motion. The council directs staff to prepare a summary of the pros and cons of the two ownership scenarios, i.e. owned by the town or owned by the utility, for the solar facility, including reference to correspondence received from the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board in this regard, and that this summary be provided to inform discussion at the special meeting of council to be held not later than June 20th.
Cool. Okay. Councillor Carver seconds the motion. Are you thirding the motion?
No, I just have a quick comment. So it provides the cutoff on the 20th. I'm gonna say the meeting would need to be on the 20th, I think, if that was the case, just looking at next week's schedule. Or alternatively, if it's acceptable to the mover and seconder, on the morning of the 21st. Because that is sort of traditionally when we have had our special meeting. So Ashley and I are available during the day on the 20th, during the evening of the 20th, or during the day on the 21st. So hopefully we can just pick that here. But in case the thing is that it's gonna be the morning of the 21st, I would just wanna make sure that's not out of alignment with the motion, so.
Is there a particular reason why it has to be done on that day?
Just in terms of
Just-
availability to provide a report 4 days in advance. I mean, it's already. So we were gonna get a report out on Monday for Thursday. The next
so-
week.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah,
got you.
yeah, we
So
just, we
is
just
there-
don't have much time left.
So is there time so there is time sensitivity, but I'm just wondering, so we're talking a week from Thursday or a week from Friday. Is that sufficient time to craft the report?
Yeah, I think we're okay with, if it's Thursday or Friday, that means the report comes out next week on either Monday or Tuesday, so I think that's okay. No, I'm just trying to respect the spirit of the
Can-
motion, so.
So Council Wilson, would you indulge a friendly amendment to make it Friday the 21st as the deadline versus the 20th, Thursday the 20th?
Sure.
With the request potentially to have this special meeting at 9 o'clock on Friday the 21st?
Which is normally.
That would be our
If
usual.
if you could indulge me on that time, that would be great.
Okay, mover and
Councilor
seconder,
Carver,
don't
are you-
mind switching the motion to the 21st.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. The amended motion, moved and seconded, is now for the meeting to be on the 21st, which is when we would have we would normally have our extra council meeting on that date. On the motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Eric will make sure to get a calendar holdout for that time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right. Let's go to committee reports. Policy and Strategy Committee. I think there's a motion. Yes, there's 3 of them.
Well, yeah, there are some motions in there. I just should note that. So the motions here that staff be directed to amend the bylaw as discussed and presented to council for first reading at the June meeting. So if those motions are passed, then what that does is it sets us up to have the documents amended for the next meeting.
Okay. Would you like?
Which is kind of unusual because usually
We
the
should do
vote.
separate motions for these, because they're all.
Yeah,
separate.
you should do them all separately.
Pardon me, just before we do that, just so I recall the cadence. So these are on the new bylaws, the new proposed bylaws.
Yeah.
And we are by moving this along now, will this be reflective of the edits and recommendations provided by the legal counsel?
So that's what I was trying
So-
to get at, was that what we'd be doing here is we'd be directing staff to bring a version to the 27th, so that version can be
Okay,
reflective of that advice. So it's a little different, because often the motion for the committee would be that the version that was at the committee be given first reading at this
Uh-huh.
meeting. And instead of doing that, to allow for time for it to get that legal advice, it's gonna get, the motion is just for staff to bring it to your next meeting.
fair enough.
Yeah, so it will be as revised when it arrives at that meeting.
That sounds good to me.
Somebody want to make the first motion? Counselor now?
I would move that staff be directed to amend the bylaw, should say the noise bylaw, as discussed to be presented to council for the first reading at the June 27th, 24 meeting.
Okay. Counselor Carver,
Second.
seconds. Motion has been moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Second motion, please.
That staff be directed to amend the draft parking bylaw as discussed to be presented to council for first reading at the June 27th, 2024 meeting.
I'll second. I'll second it.
And that's the parking bylaw.
Yes.
Okay, moved and seconded. On the motion, a question, all in favor? Motion is carried. And let's go to the third one. Yeah,
That council directs staff to inform the planning advisory committee that council appreciates the recommendation relating to the Edgewater Street Living Shoreline project and to share the CBCL design brief with the committee for feedback.
okay. Seconded by Councillor Feeney. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried as well. Thank you.
Okay.
The only other committee report is the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. Does anybody have any questions?
No, I was just going to make a
Point
motion
out, yeah.
to, file for information, but remind everyone that their AGM is also this month and you're all welcome to attend.
Where is it held, Counselor?
It is going to be held at the Bridgewater Police Service building.
Ah, okay.
Mhm.
So that's a motion.
And that's in the notes of the.
All right. And did you want a motion to receive and file that report
I did make that.
for
motion
information?
For information.
Seconded, moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. All right. Let's, I think that is all in our regular agenda.
Helga, if you wanted to say anything, there's an opportunity.
Yeah,
Well, no, I just came because I wanted to.
But just before we go into closed session, there's always a brief
Oh,
moment
I
in case
see.
somebody in the gallery, you were trying to be so
No.
courteous and get out of the room for us, and I just wanted to.
Yeah,
make sure
that's
you
fine.
did it.
No, I was here to listen to what Nick said and just to provide Nick with some support, because I think that some of his arguments also extend beyond his neighborhood, actually into other parts of town, so. And then I just wanted to hear whatever things were being said about all the other issues that came up. So I'm interested about the pool as well.
Good.
Thanks.
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, buddy.
It's in your end.
Anyone online with a question? Deputy CAO?
Yeah, there is a question from Anya Holloway, pertaining to the pool. Is there a future plan to build another pool? If so, what would this model look like? Indoor facility? Question. Would this be on the shoulders of the Mahone Bay citizens? So I think most of those things were referenced in the.
Yeah, I can give a quick, just so the design brief that we've spoken of would be the answers to the questions about where and what, and as soon as that comes forward to council, that'll be something that's public information. Right now, it's just been under development. And as far as the cost, I think we had a good conversation here about need to secure external monies to allow such a project to proceed. But that will be the determination of a future council, I would imagine.
And it is an outdoor pool, correct?
Yes, yeah, I think we can say without spoiling the design brief that it will remain an outdoor pool.
It's in the documents, so.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else, Deputy CAO?
Nope, that's all. And this evening we had a maximum of 17 viewers,
Oh, fantastic.
currently at 15.
And at least one of them in British Columbia.
Nice.
And in 12 hours, one in Italy.
There you go, there you go. Well, with
Oh, yeah, right.
with that,
Excuse me.
we will thank the folks at home for joining us. And we will say thank you again to the citizens who chose to come in tonight to hear our discussion. And at this point, our agenda is completed, notwithstanding an in-camera session, which will be conducted now. So thank you very much, folks at home, people in Victoria. We'll talk to you.
We do need a motion to go into closed session.
That's right.
Yeah.
So moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion